So let's talk about better ball striking. That's one thing that, generally speaking, probably most amateur golfers and most people that watch this sort of videos will want to improve at some stage, particularly with the longer clubs as well. So in today's demonstration, I'm going to be holding or using a 5-iron, and the reason for that is that's the type of club that you probably want to start practicing with a little bit more. So ball striking problems stem fundamentally because the trail arm, or your right arm for right-handed golfers, straightens too soon. So if my right arm straightens too soon and it's straight at impact, then I'm going to be sort of adding loft, scooping it, just not really striking down through the golf ball. But the thing is why is that really happening? Okay, and is it as simple as potentially just sort of trying to keep your right arm more bent for longer? No. Okay, the reason why not is that you want to get the feeling when you're hitting golf shots that you're firing your trail arm through, okay? Because at the end of the day, most people that are, again, for me, right-handed golfer are right side dominant, so I want to feel that sort of right hand play a role in that hitting area. I do want to make sure that I feel like it's really applying a force through that hitting zone. So how are you going to do that? Well, or probably a better question would be, why aren't you doing that? The main reason why that's not happening for most golfers is because of the sequencing of motion. Okay, and the reason why the sort of trail arm is straightening much sooner than you would want is quite simply just due to the fact that as you start your downswing, instead of triggering an element of rotation towards your lead side, like so my pelvis and chest are moving in front of the golf ball, or at least over the golf ball. So if you use my sternum as a reference, so the way I'm really nicely covering that golf ball there, when you sequence this movement correctly and I put the club across my shoulders, you can see the way that my trail shoulder really starts to drop down. Now the tendency for most amateur golfers is to start sort of lifting up. Okay, so start moving more this way. And then what you can kind of see is the difference between this motion when my shoulder drops down as opposed to this motion when my shoulder goes up. So if you fall into the latter, which from a sidearm perspective basically means that you're somebody who sort of early hip extends and stands up, then if your trail shoulder shoots up in the air, then your trail arm is going to straighten too early and you're not going to become a good ball striker. And it doesn't matter how much you try and fire that right arm through, every time you look at it on video, you're still going to look this way. And every time that you hit some shots, you know it's going to be inconsistent. The only way you can cheat it, which again, I meet people that do this, is you start to put the ball further back in the stance. And then by putting the ball further back in the stance, you kind of feel like you get a much better contact, but it's not the way that you want to be moving. So the way you want to sort of play this really is exactly the same as what I would do with people that I get the chance to meet for sessions. Let's just grab a few of these over here. So what I would do first is I'd probably kind of go, well, you know, I'd show them the video and I'd kind of go, look, you're sort of up here and you're standing up. And first of all, what I'd do is I'd get them making a few swings where they just get more accustomed to what rotation would feel like. And actually what rotation would feel like in the correct orientation. Okay, so the big difference I tend to think is that when golfers start to realize they're supposed to rotate in a downward fashion, okay, instead of an upward fashion, is that it increases their awareness of weight pressure significantly. So then you can sort of play on that. And then you can kind of say, well, look, if you're here at the top, feel like you're rotating to your left to the point where you put that weight pressure back in that lead side. And this will give them some good feelings, okay? What will happen, however, and I'm sure you've probably experienced with this yourselves, is that when you start to introduce that type of motion, you're going to start to feel quite steep, which means that you'll probably feel like you're going to come over the top and quite steep into it. So what we need to do then is we don't want to not do the correct body motion, but we don't also try and ingrain steepness and over the top movement patterns because they're no good either. So this is where you need to try and find that blend. There's different ways you can view this. One way you could view this is you could kind of go, well, the lower body will work at a faster rate of rotation, so you'll create an element of separation. And this means that the lower body will work away from the upper body, and that's why your shoulders won't be working at the same rate of rotation as the lower. There'll be an element of difference, and that's one way that you'll end up sort of making sure that you don't swing over the top. but people don't really respond well to that in terms of movement. So this is where your trail arm comes back in. And what I tend to say to people is, well, look, how about if the feeling is that you're trying to either fire your trail arm down the target, or even fire your trail arm slightly out to 1 o'clock whilst going down and left. And all of a sudden, if you put the blend of both those movement patterns together, all of a sudden you'll end up with a movement where the golfer's more confident in moving down and left, or down to the lead side, whilst that trail arm feels like it's firing the club out towards 1 o'clock. And if you can get the blend of those, then you're massively going to start to be in the right sort of movement. Okay, then you're going to start to have that ability where you look like the kind of golfer who can play the golf ball, further forward if you wanted to. And the benefit of having the golf ball further forward is you can generate more speed. Club will be moving a bit quicker, so it's an option, but it's a great drill. So you kind of go from somebody who's standing up and like this, and I'll go, right, okay, well, let's go down, and then they'll stay down and they'll go, oh God, that felt good. I haven't felt that in years, but it's gone way left. So then you're like, well, that won't work. And then you try and just educate people then to try and get the feeling of the hands moving in a slightly different direction to the body. And that's what you need to do. And you need to give that time. And what will happen is alarm bells will always be ringing, and you'll be like, well, hang on, Russ, if I start doing that in my hands, I feel like I'm going to shank it, the club face would be really open. And that's true, but give it a chance, because you don't necessarily want to go back straight into this. You need that shoulder down, you need to pivot correctly so you can keep that trail arm bent for longer. But what I'm trying to say is the feeling is, yeah, you're going to fire that arm through. You just don't want to do this because it's going to straighten up on you too early. Fire it through. Fire it through like so. And that's a great way to try and interpret the correct sort of sequencing of motion. Now, my last little point in this sort of subject area is what I sort of mentioned about the wrists. So some golfers will be a bit fearful of the club face getting too open. I would strongly suggest that you endeavour to persevere with this type of feeling, because what happens 99% of the time is people's wrist positions evolve based on their movement. So using hack motion in the golf lessons, I always see that golfers that move closer to the ball, their lead wrist will stay in extension much longer. Okay, coming in towards the downswing. And that's because if you're moving closer to the ball, the shaft will have to behave in a more vertical fashion. If you get that golfer to move like so, then what you'll find is naturally over time, and I mean time in terms of a period of a few shots, the wrist positions completely change the functionality based on the desired need to swing more out to 1 o'clock. So play around with it, 100%. You want to experience these new types of feelings. But you want better ball striking, or you want to fire that trail arm through like so, that's the way that you're going to have to try and picture this. Let me know how you guys get on. I'll catch up with you really, really soon.